We are culturally conditioned to approach human disagreement with brute force. In boardrooms, recovery circles, and kitchen table arguments, the default tactic is to apply behavioral pressure, deliver sharper facts, and demand immediate change. This approach often triggers a specific biological resistance. When a nervous system detects direct pressure, it moves into a defensive, high-friction state. Instead of an open exchange, you get calcified resistance, the internal equivalent of a locked door. The state modulation drop probe, or SDP, abandons external force entirely. It operates on a different mechanical premise. You cannot change a mind that feels cornered. The central axiom of this framework is simple: state modulation, not persuasion. Instead of launching arguments, the practitioner prioritizes vagal regulation. By lowering the interpersonal pressure and establishing psychological safety, the subject's nervous system is allowed to relax. Only in that regulated state can reality organically reorganize itself. This requires the practitioner to adopt a stance of wu-wei, or non-interference. You observe the subject without immediately framing their problem. You curate the environmental conditions, and then you step back, letting the solution emerge without forcing it. To achieve this, the practitioner relies on keepers. These are short, highly portable phrases designed to function as somatic instruments. They induce curiosity and self-reflection, bypassing the need for a lecture. By treating the interaction as an ecology to be tended, rather than a structure to be built, the SDP framework successfully replaces the coercive architecture of traditional influence with gentle, unforced participation. In highly vulnerable spaces, like code blue homeless shelters and addiction recovery circles, this trauma-informed stance is demonstrably effective. Reducing shame allows people in crisis to stabilize. But this model introduces a hidden mechanical tension. When a practitioner deliberately abandons direct persuasion, their power in the room does not actually disappear. There is a persistent professional misconception that gentle facilitation and a refusal to debate equate to a total absence of authority. In non-coercive systems, power becomes structural. It moves away from loud behavioral demands and embeds itself in how the interaction is framed and whose narrative is allowed to survive. To understand how this works, we are going to subject the SDP framework to a rigorous metapsychological critique, using its own diagnostic tools to audit its architecture. We will deconstruct the polished, highly curated system of keepers to expose the invisible vectors of authority operating directly beneath the surface of the practice. This raises a difficult question for the facilitator. Powerless facilitation often masks a deeper, more insulated form of practitioner authority that we are only beginning to map. We begin with one of the most potent keeper phrases in the SDP registry, designed specifically to diagnose agency. Who holds the screw? Who the driver? Traditionally, a practitioner deploys this probe to reveal hidden power dynamics in external environments, identifying who has surrendered agency within a specific economic or relational system. We are going to take this exact diagnostic instrument and turn it inward, aiming it directly at the SDP practitioner. While physically stepping back and remaining silent, the practitioner is still the central architect of the interaction. A theory-fluent, AI-augmented facilitator moving through vulnerable populations holds immense implicit power, regardless of how softly they speak. The practitioner controls the final interpretive framing. They decide what the interaction meant. They exercise unilateral authority to decide which responses are recorded as meaningful entrainments from the field and which reactions are discarded as irrelevant. Despite the aesthetic of non-interference, the practitioner holds the primary screws of attention, narrative survival, and historical record. This control over the historical record is formalized in what is called the recursion chamber, a setup where the practitioner feeds their personal practice logs into multiple AI models for synthesis. Outsourcing analysis to Claude, Grok, and ChatGPT creates an illusion of rigorous, independent epistemic humility. It appears as though the field is verifying the work. This chart reveals the structural flaw. The practitioner authored the constraints, framed the questions, and hand-selected the data. The prompt inherently limits the analysis, judging data curated for success. Bound by tight constraints, AI models act as high-fidelity echoes, returning the exact narrative they were fed. This closed, self-sealing structure forms an authority sandwich. It flatters the practitioner by confirming their non-coercive intentions, using their own carefully selected vocabulary. But the most critical data is missing. The actual human nervous systems, the peers, the family members, the vulnerable subjects on the other side of the intervention, are entirely excluded from this validation process. Without input from the actual field, the models cannot assess if a gentle modulation was experienced as supportive, or if it felt like gaslighting and dismissal. Curating successful meaning-making through controlled AI mirrors creates a self-aestheticizing echo chamber. It actively isolates the practitioner from empirical reality. We see this isolation most clearly in the fourth confirmed keeper phrase: "We're always the last to understand what we're being hollowed for." In processing grief, this framing carries profound poetic power and genuine emotional weight. It allows an individual to endure intense experience without needing immediate answers. But as a tool for empirical social practice, it introduces a severe metapsychological risk: the aestheticization of pain. Framing every chaotic field event as a necessary archetypal hollowing turns raw contingency into a sanitized personal mythology. The messiness of human interaction is rewritten as cosmic destiny. This is evident in a critical omission from the SDP log. There is a complete absence of raw chronologies. The messy, reactive, untheorized phases of ideas before they crystallized are missing. Archiving only the post-hoc, elegantly theorized versions of events flattens the chaotic reality of actual social practice. It deletes the friction that proves the field is real. When a practitioner curates only their archetypal successes, they cast themselves as the infallible protagonist of a myth, overriding the objective truth of the field. This brings us to the central paradox uncovered by the power audit. The practitioner claims strict non-ownership over others' lives while maintaining absolute, unquestioned ownership over the meta-story of those lives. This matrix represents the current SDP registry. To survive ethical scrutiny, it requires a permanent structural addition, the shadow log, a mandatory accounting of the practice's negative space. The first required data point on this new axis is overreach events. Practitioners hold an ethical mandate to document the exact moments where a well-intentioned probe or framing inadvertently increased a subject's shame load. You must record non-consensual entrainments, instances when a somatic carrier landed poorly and was explicitly experienced by the subject as manipulation. Forcing the retention of the messy middle, the raw, unedited chronologies, is the only valid defense against self-mythologizing. Without a shadow log, the stakes are severe. The practice risks forever masking covert psychological pressure as gentle modulation. Escaping this self-sealing loop requires a two-way observation window that explicitly records when the field says no. Advanced practitioners must actively hunt for the moments their non-coercive framework fails. A methodology built on the promise of epistemic humility can only be validated by its relentless willingness to document its own failures. That is the only way to ensure true ecological participation over curated authority.